Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight on the webinar on Study Abroad in a Changing World. I'm Christine Gaswin. I'm a coordinator in Parent and Family Programs. One thing before we get started tonight, we will be doing questions through the Q&A function on your Zoom. So any questions that you have, go ahead and type in that box and we will address at the end of the session. And without further ado, Sylvia Mitterndorfer is here to talk to us about study abroad.
Welcome. I'm delighted to have this chance to talk with you this afternoon and to see your interest in study abroad, particularly in this COVID world. So as we begin, I wanted to start with just a brief introduction of study abroad and talk a little bit about COVID-19, because of course that is so critical right now. And then we wanted to leave some time at the end for questions. So we will gather some questions together. So please know we're happy to talk, but we also recognize that things get very busy and there are often more questions than the time allows. So please know that I and my team are very happy to talk with you and your students virtually this semester, and hopefully I'll get to meet you in person sometime very soon. So with that, let me pull up our screen here. And so with that, study abroad, normally we would be beginning with, and Christine, can you see this? Yeah, okay. So normally we would be beginning with questions around why study abroad and what are the importances. But of course, in this world today, we would be remiss to not begin by talking about COVID-19. So let me just start that study abroad here is a very important experience for so many students and has been historically. Almost 60% of our students do go abroad in a normal year, but these are not normal times. And certainly as we navigate how to return to a more active world where student physical mobility is more easily achieved. With COVID-19, there's been a lot of adaptations, and we're very much looking forward to a future where more of our students can study abroad. So since it is the big presence in our room and in our daily lives, let me just start briefly by saying that, of course, COVID-19 has fundamentally changed the options and opportunities for our students who are right now in the midst of trying to study abroad. In spring 2020, we did have students have to leave their programs, and then of course health and safety for students who were abroad already, or now as we consider having students return abroad, is always first and foremost on our minds. Of course, then in the case of students who had to come back, it was critically important that we were to have students, and we worked with our partners to have students be able to have the opportunity to stay on track academically. And now as we map a future, again, making sure academic resilience as well as health and safety measures are in place are really the key fundamental building blocks of how we move from here. A couple approaches. William & Mary has long had an international travel policy and also structures in place for travel alerts. We have an international travel and security manager, an international travel review committee on which I sit. And those policies and processes and structures that were in place prior to this pandemic certainly served us well, and they continue to go. So they have been tested in other circumstances. Of course, it's not quite the same thing as having a pandemic on this level compared to what we had seen with SARS or H1N1 prior, but nevertheless, those structures were and continue to be in place. We work very closely with partners, other universities around the globe here, as well as experts. We take guidance very strongly from the State Department and affiliated from there, the OSAC, as well as the CDC and other agencies. And our insurance company also has a security company connected with it that gives us analyses. And so we're monitoring and tracking things very carefully. We did suspend study abroad in summer 2020. And in fall 2020 as well, although we opened for this semester opportunities for students to petition to be able to still study abroad if, again, circumstances on the ground warranted it and there were sufficient support structures as well as academic urgency for students to go. That was particularly important for our international students who were already abroad, who were seeking to study in their home country. but that process was open to everyone. And now we move forward. We are reviewing right now our spring 2021 options, as well as circumstances. And we are still proceeding very much actively with summer 2021 and beyond study abroad programming as well. And since, unless, if something amazing happens and things return to normal quickly, that's one thing. But since we recognize that these developments have been different and likely will be incremental moving forward, the programs that we're planning and how we return back to study abroad have certainly been looking at risk mitigation measures in all aspects, just like we think about how William & Mary has evaluated and changed processes here on campus this semester. Similarly, we're navigating how do we reduce risk and how do we mitigate risk in each of the unique circumstances where our students might be going, taking into account that, of course, there are lots of different things that could still develop and that we work with partners around the globe for all of our programs. So in short, COVID-19 has clearly impacted our students, but we are hopeful. We see great interest by students, and we are hopeful that once some of the travel constraints and health concerns around the world improve, that we will be able to very quickly return to a more normal, as close as one can in whatever setting it is, student mobility opportunities, so study abroad opportunities for our students. Particularly for those of you who have younger students, things will probably progressively develop as each semester, as we get each semester under our belt. I'm really happy to answer more questions about this, but I'm cognizant of time. So again, I wanted to quickly intro with that, but also return to some of the other aspects of study abroad that I hope I can lay out for you. In terms of why, just abbreviate this quickly, but William & Mary believes so strongly in study abroad, in part because the learning outcomes, as well as the experiences and the growth that can come from study abroad and from these opportunities, so closely aligned with the overall objectives of the university. And so when we think about academic learning, of course, study abroad can provide an opportunity to study field from a different perspective in a country, perhaps in a different language, in a different setting, and different academic system. And that kind of in the field learning is certainly something, and experiential learning is certainly something that is very important to us academically. But we also see in a number of studies, as well as what we hear from our alumni and we and others, is just that there's so much growth outside of just the academic that can happen in study abroad. The resilience, the flexibility, and the preparation for life beyond William & Mary is certainly something that we value deeply. And so you see that study abroad is then deeply connected to our curriculum. You might have already heard that Call 300 is, which is required of all students, is met by 60% or so of students through study abroad. All the programs that we're going to discuss today do carry Call 300. And that came from our faculty, and recognizing that study abroad is really critical and something that can provide unique opportunities for our students' academic and personal growth. Quick overview, and I'm going to use 2018-19 as a benchmark just because 2019-2020 was so unique given everything that's happening this year. But in a normal year, we would have students in over 50 countries. We, again, work with so many of the students throughout their academic years with us. And as I mentioned, all the programs discussed automatically carry Call 300 credit, and so therefore very deeply connected to the curriculum here. There are, of course, on-campus options and other options as well, especially important during these times. But again, I know that's a question that's often come up. In terms of program types, one of the things that I wanted to have you walk away from this webinar too is just a brief overview of how William & Mary approaches study abroad in terms of the types of programs that are available to your student. Part of the difficulty of having a discussion like this is that your students have hundreds of options to choose from, and how to distill all of that into a short time period is particularly challenging. There's a lot more information on our website, including some more detailed descriptions about the different program types and ways of searching and then getting more information. But in kind of the biggest perspective, these are a couple of the categories of of opportunities for your students. We do have students who often study abroad on multiple programs. So it is not as though you have to choose one and stick with that. There are lots of different ways of doing this. I think we've had one student do, or a few students do something like 5 programs in the course of their William and Mary career. So again, not mutually exclusive, but just different approaches. And each program has its own learning goals and objectives. When we think about often students going abroad, often for the first time, it's often through a faculty-led short-term program that's in the summer or in the winter. And as the name implies, it means William and Mary students going abroad with a faculty member. Usually it's a group of William and Mary students. We work with close partners overseas to develop programs that closely align to William and Mary's curriculum. And I'll talk a little bit more about those programs in a few minutes. William and Mary also has up to 4 sponsored semester programs in a given year. These are semester programs where we have particularly close partnerships with programs in a location where our faculty, there's a faculty liaison here from William and Mary, as well as then our partner faculty overseas, have developed some programs that provide students with some unique opportunities. Exchange programs, these are William and Mary tuition exchange programs. These, as the name imply, means it's William and Mary partnering with another excellent university abroad and exchanging students moving in each direction, which means if your student goes on one of these programs, they get the opportunity to be directly enrolled in another university and be part of this flow of students going back and forth and that network that creates. We also offer what are called embedded international experiences that are part of William and Mary semester programs. We see these particularly in spring break or in right at the end of the semester. And those are where the bulk of the academic work is done here on campus, but then a faculty member, a professor will take a class to a particular location that then ties very closely to their course at William and Mary. And then in terms of other opportunities, we work with lots of other universities abroad or other US universities who have programs abroad, or organizations that, they have to be accredited in order to get credit, but other organizations that specialize in offering study abroad programs. And through that, your students, when you combine all of these, there really are hundreds of different choices. And even if we don't list a particular program, we work really closely with your students to try to help find the program that best meets their needs. And if they find a program on their own that they're really excited about, there's a pretty easy process to go through where we just want to make sure that some basic things are in place, but that there are not many institutional barriers to making that happen, as long as it meets some requirements. From there, one of the other big questions we get is, when can my student go abroad? So these are responses now in the not COVID informed, but just in general. We often have freshmen coming in saying, I immediately want to go abroad. During freshman year, winter embedded programs are certainly an option, although again, this year is a little different in that context. But we see quite a lot of freshmen after their first year, so rising sophomores, then participate in summer faculty-led study abroad programs. Interested in a semester, again, mostly it's junior year, sometimes some majors, and this is where, again, we're happy to work with your student as well as their academic advisors in their departments who work with your student to find out within a given major. In some cases, it's second semester of sophomore year that works particularly well. And I will caution, first semester senior year is a little bit more difficult, but I know that there can be ways. We just need to be really careful about certain things related to when transfer credits can come back. And because I do know that some students who had hoped to go abroad this past fall as juniors are now looking at senior study abroad. Again, it's more complicated. It's not normally what we would be looking at, but obviously circumstances are pretty unique right now. And then winter and embedded programs, those really are open from the moment you begin at William and Mary. So there are, again, many different choices. And again, students do participate and partake in many of these. Quick example, cognizant of time. So I mentioned the sponsored semester programs. One example of those is a program we have in La Plata, Argentina. It's just outside of Buenos Aires. It is for advanced Spanish speakers, but it has a really unique focus on human rights. We work with the Commission on Memory there. Students are on homestays that connect to the theme of human rights, and they have an internship component. And I highlight this briefly. It has great connections with research of our faculty, and some of our students who participated in this program have also done some amazing work in DC and with our faculty here on connecting and looking at these topics, both from US government perspectives as well as from research opportunities on site. But it's just an example of how study abroad is often not only just the courses students can take, but things like research and things like internships are often also connected and part of that experience, as well as, of course, the academic study and the language learning in this particular program. In terms of faculty-led short-term programs, again, I've briefly touched on some of these matters. Just a couple points. These are William & Mary courses and William & Mary credit, so they do count for residential credit. It's particularly important for students who might have brought a lot of transfer credit in, particularly transfer students who are looking for William & Mary credits. And again, some of these faculty-led programs may also carry Call 200 in addition to Call 300. You can't double dip, but most of these programs have 2 courses in the course of a month, and one could meet the Call 300 requirement and the other could meet the Call 200 requirement, depending on the program. So again, as your student is thinking about building the curriculum, it's certainly something to take into consideration. And again, I'm sorry that Zoom cuts off the top here, but again, I just wanted to highlight that study abroad can come in many different forms, and that the connection with community is certainly a really important one. As we navigate COVID-19 times, of course, things that what that looks like can be different, and these pictures were clearly taken in a world before COVID-19, but it's an example of how collaboration can be. This is one of our faculty, Professor Leah Glenn, who has repeatedly taught community engagement and community-based learning program in Cape Town, South Africa. Some other examples, I'm going to go through these quite quickly in interest of time, but for example, our students can study globalization from different perspectives, and we have a different angle each year. For summer 2021 in Goa and Bangalore, India, they'll be looking at it from art history and a religious studies perspective, but the theme of globalization and looking at how it's impacted different parts of India is certainly, is a thread throughout. We have a program that will be running for the second time in Kigali, Rwanda, with the former dean of the School of Education at William & Mary. It's a community well-being and peace education opportunity where, again, students are deeply connected to what is happening there and are asked to make connections to their own experiences. The Santiago de Compostela program, for example, in Spain, when we think about what study abroad can look like in different ways, is focused on pilgrimage studies, and it includes very rigorous hiking of the Camino de Santiago, but framed in an academic perspective. And again, is just a really unique opportunity for students to study abroad and also be delving deeply into classes alongside this living learning community. The Potsdam, Germany program is an example of a language studies program, and we do have a lot of these as well. Students live with homestays. They're deeply focused on language learning. In this case, they're in Potsdam, just outside of Berlin, and so they have the opportunity and the access of the national capital, as well as all the resources there, while also being directly at a German university at a time when there are students around and they can kind of see what student life is like there. So these are just some brief examples because we don't have enough time to delve deeply, but here is a list of what we have planned for summer 2021 right now. That list does change and it got cut off at the very bottom, but again, checking our website is always the best place to see what our offerings are given. Again, these come with different themes. We have a number of programs looking at sustainability and environmental studies, or security studies, or we have quite a few science, biology, chemistry courses being offered, a public health course, for example, in comparative health systems, which right now is certainly very interesting. So again, there are lots of different characteristics to each of these programs, and I encourage you to check them out on the website. Winter programs, this is an area for those of you who've had students at William & Mary for a while, you may have noticed that winter breaks are getting longer. This next winter break is particularly long because we're ending early, but even under normal circumstances, we would not have started until January 27th. That's a window where we're seeing growth in different program opportunities. And these are just some of the examples. For winter 2022, we are looking at La Plata, Argentina, Auckland, New Zealand, and have a host of others that are just about ready to be launched. So again, our website is where your student and you can find more information. These are usually about 2.5 week programs. All study abroad is for credit. I will say these are some logistics and responses to questions we've got again. You can see which programs are faculty-led as well as Sylvia and La Plata or William & Mary courses and William & Mary grades. The rest of the programs are transfer credit. Each academic department at William & Mary has a professor designated to work with students on study abroad transfer and with our office very closely. So depending on which courses students want to take. Again, reiterate the call 300 and in application requirements, again, academic and conduct good standing. Students are not eligible if they're on probation. And sometimes there are some specific requirements, I would say particularly for Oxford, which is one of our sponsored semester programs. They have very specific requirements for our students, but again, some programs may also have things like language prerequisites or even some other coursework if it's a specialized STEM program, for example. Deadlines are usually the semester before students go abroad. I will make one big exception there. It is the Oxford program, which is usually where students can go for a semester or full year during their junior year. The application deadline is December 1st of their sophomore year. So it is way, way early, even if they're not going until spring 2020, the spring of their fall, not just the next spring, but the spring a year and a half later. And that is because we work really closely with Oxford and there's some specific requirements for that. So that's the most notable difference. Again, there's more information. In terms of next deadlines, there is the Oxford deadline coming up December 1st, but the bigger deadline is February 1st, 2021 for the William & Mary Summer 2021 faculty-led programs. So that's one of the ones fast approaching. In terms of funding, this is incredibly important to us. Access to study abroad has been one of our key priorities. And we've been really pleased by how much additional funding we have been able to offer students for study abroad. The 650 will probably actually, is on top of financial aid, I should say. So this is, again, financial aid is generally portable. The 650 then is on top of that. Most of that funding is for need-based financial aid, financial need-based, but there are also some very generous merit scholarships in this, and we hope that that amount will continue to grow. We have a variety of different initiatives and scholarships. We just launched a new program called the Griffin Guarantee for students who receive Pell Grants. There's a national scholarship process for study abroad. It's called the Gilman Scholarship. If a student submits and is eligible to submit this national scholarship, even if they don't get the national scholarship, they're guaranteed $4,000 through us. So again, it's called the guarantee. There's some more details on our website, but those are just examples of how we're trying to really support students in being able to go abroad, and hundreds of students do get scholarships every year to make this possible. And again, we also, as I alluded to, we also work with students to try to leverage other external funding sources and scholarships that students may have. This is really, really important to us to get funding and scholarships for our students. The flip side of this too is that we work really, really hard to keep costs down and as affordable and as accessible to our students as possible. So here's some other financial information. Again, this gets very detailed. I'm happy to take questions, but I also really encourage you to look at our website. I won't repeat everything on here, but again, structurally, for programs that are faculty-led and sponsored, there is a just flat fee that is specific to each program that reflects the actual costs of those programs. Exchange programs are regular William & Mary tuition and fees, plus then whatever the local room and board and housing is, as well as then the off-campus fee and insurance that we do require, which obviously in these times is particularly important. And then for other William and Mary programs too, we try to make this as accessible as possible. And I will note that students who go on third-party programs, so other study abroad programs that are not administered by William and Mary, are still full-time students with us. They register with our office and are still in the system as a full-time William and Mary student. It's just your bill will come largely from another organization, but financial aid then does factor in those costs as well. So your financial aid package would not be packaged around the $375 and the $170 billed by William and Mary, but rather the actual cost of what that program includes, including things like flights and other expenses related to the program. Health and safety. So I led a little bit with COVID-19, but beyond that, health and safety, of course, is the #1 priority for us. Not, as I mentioned, there are extensive protocols and other processes and policies in place that have served us well throughout this pandemic, but have also, been our processes for a very long time. All students have to go through pre-departure orientations. Our international travel security manager and I and lots of others are on call 24/7 to support. All students are required to have this insurance that I mentioned earlier. And again, there are a number of policies and things that we put in place to try to mitigate risk as much as possible. So if you have a student who's interested, or if you're interested in learning more, I just really encourage you to go to our website. Again, the URL is right there. We are offering virtual advising, drop-ins, and we have lots of other ways of engaging virtually. So even if your student isn't here on campus, or if you're interested, our office, we have a lot of different ways. In the normal semester, we have a whole crew of students who've studied abroad who are here to welcome students from 11 to 5. Again, that's different this semester, but we certainly look forward to a time when that will return. Things like Study Abroad 101 and 102, 101 and 201 are all available online. So if you want to watch a video and learn a little bit more in depth beyond what we can cover right now, how all of this works, we really encourage you to do that. And again, we're always here and available to work with you. We're excited to work with your students. And I've always appreciated the connections I've made with so many parents over so many years. I know this year we have to do this, started off virtually, but again, please know that my office and I are happy, or just looking forward to working with your students and you during these fluid and evolving times. So with that, I look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We do have some questions that came in, so we will jump right into it.
Great.
Are there any programs that are accepting students this spring?
There are still lots of opportunities for students. I think we're seeing already an opening. So like William and Mary, most places canceled summer 2020 entirely. And again, generally in the fall, we're also canceling or limiting things very much. There are some countries, so we're seeing in Australia, a lot of the universities there have said that they've suspended in and outward student movement and study. But there are also still a lot of other parts of the world that where the universities are saying that they are welcoming students and that programs are developing. And so these are some of the things that we're evaluating right now. We are working with students, and if you have a student interested in spring 2021, I strongly encourage them to reach out to us. They can schedule an appointment with our advisor right online, and that way they can have a Zoom call or a phone call or whatever they're most comfortable with to talk more specifically about what their interests are and what opportunities there may be in a particular location. We are also, again, assessing more broadly how realistic this is. Some of the things that we're looking at are, of course, things about what is the COVID-19 situation, but also what's travel availability, are visas available, what support structures, much in the way that we think about what has William and Mary done for your students this semester to mitigate and plan for. This is what other universities around the world are also grappling with. And so we look at, what is it that they're doing and how does that line up? We also see that many programs, of course, for semesters are in really different timelines. So there are some countries where students go where the spring semester does not begin until April. So that's also, something to take into consideration in terms of where we hope how things may evolve or not, but where we hope that, that's a little bit different than perhaps a January departure. But again, these are all things that I encourage a student to come and talk to an advisor about. We are split by region so that each advisor has a regional expertise and they can really know the program and advise their students.
Great, thank you. Next question is, given the number of students whose plans have been interrupted by COVID, will the programs be more competitive for students to be accepted into?
It's a little hard to know at this point how quickly things are going to evolve. I think we and others in the field are looking at a whole host, a range of how this could evolve, including, that potentially there could be questions around capacity and how one could scale to be able to try to offer as many students the opportunity as is possible. So I think it's a little bit hard to know at this point, but we are certainly very cognizant that once things do return to a state that is closer to normal, where flights and travel and everything become a lot easier, that we are certainly hearing from students that they're really eager to go, and we want to make sure we're there to try to help as many students go.
And kind of along those lines, will the students that were selected for study abroad in the summer 2020 have priority for summer 2021?
So we did reach out. I think my screen just disappeared. I'm sorry. We did reach out to students who had planned to study abroad in summer 2020. We had pivoted some of the courses, and our faculty taught some of the courses remotely this summer. So we know that some students were able to continue their studies in that way without physically going. And we have reached out to students to roll over applications. There are some eligibility matters, like I mentioned, with making sure students aren't on probation and all those kinds of things. So there's never just an automatic, but we are trying to work with those students who had hoped to study abroad in spring 2020. That would certainly be factored into the conversation. But again, we are hoping to have sufficient spaces and slots for all students who are interested.
Great, thank you. For transfer students who need 60 credits with William and Mary, do the study abroad credits count towards those?
So for the, I want to make sure I understood the question correctly. If it's a William and Mary faculty-led program, then there's a William and Mary courses, and they are treated just like here on campus William and Mary courses, and would be treated like residential credit. Mm-hmm.
Okay. This parent has a student that was accepted into study abroad summer 2020 and is interested in the 2021. Will he be able to receive the same aid that he was awarded previously?
We look at, and we basically, it is another application process. So it is not as simple a guarantee. Again, we're happy to roll over applications, but we want students to be able to have an opportunity to update their applications. So in that context, just because financial situations can change in the course of a year, while I always hope it's for the better, we also recognize that that may not be the case. The scholarships will be reviewed again in the spring. And for those who haven't gone through the process, the application deadline for study abroad scholarships is at the same time for the summer as the deadline for the applications. When the decision about acceptance to the summer program is given, we endeavor to also have the scholarship award also provided right around the same time, so that students can make informed decisions knowing how much the real costs are. And I'd actually like to take this chance, I meant to mention this earlier too, but for those interested, if a program is canceled by William and Mary prior to a program starting, all fees are non-refundable. So are refundable, sorry. So even those that are considered non-refundable, that's if someone else, just changes their mind on something. But if we cancel it, then all those fees are would be returned to the students. So that's also something important to take into consideration as you're planning for the spring, that we try to reduce the financial risk, and again, I want to make that very clear.
The online list of study abroad options, does it include requirements, the prerequisites for any classes or languages available online? And will any of those change with everything that has happened with the pandemic?
I encourage you to keep checking what the availabilities are. Our plan is not to change things in terms of prerequisites significantly at this time, but it is something that, as programs evolve, that we continue to look at, and as we think about what this has meant. So, for example, we were planning to run a public health program in Geneva this winter, where the basis of the program is meetings with the WHO and with others, obviously highly relevant right now, but given security measures, not something that will be easily done in person or will be feasible in person. We've pivoted that program to an online program for this winter, and again, adjusted courses and tried to make it as accessible to as many students as possible. And in a case like that, we were actually able to also, where the application is not closed yet, but are able to offer, obviously the price point is also much lower than physically moving somewhere, and are offering scholarships to help make that open for students as well, kind of like a virtual study abroad. There are some cultural opportunities connected with that as well. And so it's really treated like a program as opposed to only a course. So.
Okay.
Depending on how much longer COVID-19 impacts travel, those are certainly all avenues that we're looking at. We're working with partners to do kind of partnerships. So again, I just encourage you to keep watching our website, but I also encourage our students, again, to reach out to our office, because then we can make sure to notify them as opportunities become available.
Okay. If a student was accepted to a program for summer 2020, do they have to restart their application, or is it still good from the previous?
So all summer 2020, William & Mary faculty-led summer 2020 students were contacted probably, I think it was in August, and asked if they were interested in in kind of having their application be rolled into for the coming summer. And we did have, quite a few students who expressed interest. If your student didn't respond to that, they're certainly welcome to reach out to us still, and they can then edit. So if there are things that they want to add to their application, they're certainly able to do that. But if they don't want to have to redo everything, including essays and things, we do try to make the application pretty accessible as is, but it certainly helps and alleviates some steps.
Okay. Can seniors do summer abroad?
So that's a really good question, and I know one that will probably get more and more. Seniors can, if they then delay their graduation until August. And so that is one of the challenges of students can still walk in that graduation, and we every year have students who do opt for that as well. So we know that, especially for those who we're rising seniors for summer 2020, that is something that might be of interest to them. So again, encourage your student to reach out to our office, and so that they can get instructions on what they would need to do.
Okay. Are there study abroad options in Europe that focus on STEM subjects?
That's a great question. STEM is one of the areas of study that we've really focused on. And when I say we, that's my office, but we also have a faculty advisory committee that has been very committed to creating more opportunities. So some of our faculty-led programs in Europe this summer do have STEM courses. For example, our program director in Prague this summer is a biology faculty member. One of our faculty in Cambridge is a chemistry faculty member. We have a mathematician leading our Galway program this next summer. It doesn't mean in those cases that everyone in the program has to take those courses, but that they are offering courses in those fields. We also have programs that regularly offer STEM courses. So our St. Andrews and our Adelaide program, for example, they have locally be taught sustainability and environmental studies courses as just some examples. So there are changes always on the faculty led. I mentioned there's a public health program that's coming up in Nantes. That was in Geneva, and now we are also offering one in the summer in Nantes. That's a comparative health systems. So again, there are certainly options. There also are, again, semester options. We have quite a few of our STEM students who go to the UK and study abroad at our exchange partnerships. Our physics department, for example, is highlighted. St. Andrews is an excellent fit for students to study abroad, and has even mapped out which courses align with the William and Mary credit. And again, so enrolling directly at a university can be an option just because they also offer all these different fields. And then there are specialized programs that are specific for study abroad where students can really delve deeply. And these are usually through third-party other organizations. And again, we're happy to work with your students. So there's a lot of choices. I think sometimes the hard part is actually sifting through what the different choices are and what interests are. And that's where our advisors and our website hopefully can be of some help. We have quite a few STEM students who, for example, go to Denmark. They have some really interesting programs as well.
And branching off onto the third-party programs, there's one question, and the link appears to be broken on the website regarding third-party programs. But are these listed on your website because they are approved as acceptable call 300s?
Yes. So anything that goes through our students, through our office, it does not require any specific petition or anything else. So anything that you see there. And again, sometimes students will find a program that is not on our list and say, you know what, this is really the fit. This is really where I want to go. We have a vetting process whereby we review things like making sure that credits are going to be eligible from this institution for transfer, which we all want to make sure, and some other aspects of it, and to ensure. And then again, as long as a student can transfer back credit, meaning that they get a regular transfer requirements of a C or better, or in a William and Mary case, right, that they're taking a William and Mary course on study abroad, the call 300 part is automatic.
Wonderful. If you live out of state, would the tuition rate remain out of state with doing a semester abroad?
That's a good question. So if you do a tuition exchange program, yes, then you continue to pay your tuition and fees. If to William and Mary, room and board is to local. If you go on any other program for the semester, that's not the case. So for the William and Mary sponsored semester programs, it is whatever the cost of that program is. And it doesn't matter in state or out of state. It's a program fee that includes the academic tuition, board, a room, and partial board. And so again, that then is, and again, some of those sponsored semesters, Oxford is quite expensive, but some of the other ones are actually in-state tuition or lower for anyone, or right around there, pretty close. So again, they can be some really great financial opportunities. And then for third-party programs, and I should say that for St. Andrews, we have a special arrangement where students can go as exchange or through a direct enroll, but they're still through our office, and for all intents and purposes, it's the same. But we have such demand that we wanted to make sure we had another pathway. So for third-party programs and for the St. Andrews direct enroll, it's just $375, $170 to William and Mary. Those are the only two charges that are kind of for all students. If your student's program has a specific, like a William and Mary charge that's separate, but beyond that, it's whatever the cost is of the program. And so there is certainly a great deal of variation in semester costs, and some out-of-state parents have certainly found that to be advantageous for them.
All right, keeping in mind time, we'll make this the last question. We've covered a lot of stuff, but do you foresee changes in the host families coming out of this when study abroad comes up? Or do you see that being able to go back to a sense of normalcy?
You mean for like components of the program, like homestays?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So part of, as we think about how to come out of this, is that we are examining each of the components of what it is that both what the learning objectives are of the program, and then which of the components, how we might reduce COVID-19 risk in that particular context. And so that could affect how we look at homestays, and certainly things like testing protocols and how we manage that. I think in the long view, if we think beyond COVID-19 now, homestays have proven to be excellent opportunities for a lot of students, particularly in language or cultural connections. And some of our programs heavily rely on that connection with the homestay families. And we've had homestay families who've worked with us for well over a decade. And so again, I think in the long term, they can be really important opportunities for students in study abroad. I should note that housing arrangements vary broadly across different programs. There are some where homestays are integral, and then many of our students, particularly those in semester programs, are at university dorms, very much like having the like a Wayman Mary, but somewhere else, like at a host local university. So again, there's just a mix. And when we talk to students about which programs are a really good fit for them, that is certainly something that we take into consideration. I think beyond us too, I think there's a long-term commitment to homestays. Part of it is just finding out how to do that safely right now in COVID-19. Yeah, and I see a bunch more questions here. I'm sorry that I know we're tight on time, but again, I'm also happy to answer questions. I'll put my email address in. It was in the presentation, but I know that let me put the email address in the chat in case you want to reach out to me. And we also have a general email address where students can do, and I mean, anyone's happy to write to me, to any advisor, or to our general email address, whichever is most convenient for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. This was a lot of great information, and hopefully families will continue to join our webinar series.
Thank you very much. And I
Thank you.
you all
Have a
in
great
person
night.
someday. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.